The art of not knowing. I grew up in a pretty broken family system. If you've been following the series, you know something about that. But in my life, several people, several factors intervened and changed the entire trajectory of my life. And one of those factors was education, where I came of age almost by accident. I got one of the best educations in the nation, and that changed the whole trajectory of my life. Consequently, when I received a small inheritance and our family created a charitable fund and started making distributions from that fund every year, my mind automatically went to education. I looked for organizations that would offer young people the same intervention that I had experienced, which turns out is not easy. It is hard to find a place where a dollar will improve educational outcomes. Well, as I was researching, I came across this story. A simple project to improve educational outcomes: collect used books from schools and libraries in Western villages, ship them to rural villages overseas, improve literacy, improve English, improve life outcomes. Great, very straightforward. Except children, especially girls, walk long distances every day to fetch water. And by the time they return, there's very little time left to use those books. Except rates of childhood malaria are so high that childhood fatigue and sleepiness is so pronounced, very little energy left to use those books. Except teachers needed training in literary instruction, and living in far-flung villages like they did, that was a logistical challenge. So literacy rates were connected to water access, connected to sanitation, connected to safe spaces for children, especially girls, connected to teacher training, connected to community health. So literacy rates require well digging and latrine building and mosquito netting and itinerant trainer training and multi-pronged funding strategies. And our family's annual contribution was pretty small, and the complexity of this endeavor was so large, I'll tell you, that will shut your brain down. Sorry, education, we need an easier project. Because literacy is connected to water, connected to sanitation, connected to malaria, connected to remote training, connected to safety. It's a degree of complexity that easily overwhelms us, freezes our decision making, tempts us to retreat to simpler problems. But that's our world. That's the world of polycrisis and metacrisis. But here's the good news that we've been seeing. We have a roadmap for that world. There is a place in the spiritual journey that can prepare us to live in, thrive in, function in that world. Now, our brains, when we are not looking, will reduce the world to a very simple framework. Our brains will reduce complexity down to clear rules and clear answers and clear enemies and clear solutions, which would be great if only the world worked that way. So, this stage of spirituality, the attributes that we are describing of that stage, stage 5, where our spiritual communities can prepare people to live in the world that really is going to be a world that prepares people to live with complexity. We are going to be preparing people, instead of collapsing under complexity, to work in it and thrive in it. So, in the balance of these episodes, we're going to explore several attributes of Stage 5 and how our communities can build those attributes in our people. And the first one is this: to help us deal with complexity, we're going to have to get comfortable with paradox. We're going to have to get comfortable with paradox. Now, we saw in the last episode that life is not binary. It is not us and them. We saw that two values both can be true, and true groups can both have truth even while appearing to disagree with one another. We saw that ours can be a world of justice and mercy, freedom and responsibility, local needs and global consequences. Early in our journeys, either or feels so right. Both and, on the other hand, feels so uncomfortable. And feeling uncomfortable, our brains will do what they do. They will try to eliminate one side of the equation to simplify and streamline for us. So here's an example. A community approaches budget season. Should we fund a program for children, or should we fund a program for seniors? Both matter. Both are morally good. but our brains try to eliminate the tension, because that way we would only have to deal with one. We only have money for one, so our brains will try and make the decision straightforward. Mount an argument like, children are the future. Seniors have lived their lives. Or, seniors are paying the bills. We owe them honor and care. But as we saw, that pattern of thinking won't solve polycrisis, metacrisis, but the developmental roadmap that this stage of spirituality gives us can point us to a way of being that welcomes the tension between the two, stays with that tension, realizing that that tension is often an indicator that we are approaching something that is truer and something that is more beautiful. A way of holding the tension of both concerns, not eliminating one for our streamlined brain desire, but do that in order to make the wisest possible decision. Paradox is not the enemy. Tension is not the enemy. They are how we approach deeper forms of wisdom. Now that would be great, except our brains hate paradox. And our brains love certainty, and our brains love easy. It's why earlier in our lives, our spiritual journeys put so much energy into finding the right rule and the right authority figure and the right doctrine, because again, that's so much easier. But also again, if only the world worked that way. But in our world, certainty is often unavailable. In our world, probability is often the best we can get. Trade-offs or juggling now and later, the best we can get. In our world, we don't have all the information we need. We don't have everything we need to know. So thank you again for your research, Dr. Fowler, to point us to a way of being comfortable, not knowing everything that we need to know. Because it turns out wisdom does not require perfect clarity. What wisdom requires is discernment. What wisdom requires is reflection and a willingness to adjust as new insights appear. I really feel for the public health leaders who had to manage the pandemic without all the data available, had to do it without clear-cut answers, and they had to act early because to not act early could have caused even greater harm. But that is often the reality that we live in. Reality is complex. It is too complex for having the right rule to work. Too complex for having the right answer or the right formula or the right authority. They are just not enough. Now I know, hear that idea that right rules are not enough, right answers are not enough, and it's easy to get nervous. What then? Anything goes? Is that what we're saying here? Well, no. But what we are saying is that it is the principles behind the rules and not the rules themselves that we must honor. That's a big thing. It is the principles behind the rules and not the rules themselves that we must honor. And we must teach our communities to do that. It is the principles behind the rules and the values behind the rules that we're after. And we often cannot honor those principles and values by simply following a rule or a formula, even if we got that rule or that formula from a holy book. In stage 5 thinking, we start getting comfortable with the idea that ours is a quest for the thing under the thing, the value under the rule, and the quest to honor that value in this application, in this moment, in this situation. Honesty, use that as an example. Truth is an important rule, sure, an important principle. But tell the truth devoid of compassion and we will miss an even bigger truth. And then truth-telling can do more harm than good. But learning to seek out the thing under the thing, we can also learn to speak truth in a way that also protects dignity, that also strengthens relationships. The principles behind the rules are the anchors. The practices and the rules have to adapt to the principles. Now, if you grew up in my time and place, your brain would be sounding an alarm right now. Oh my God, he's talking about moral relativism, which growing up where I grew up, that was universally a bad thing. But kinda yeah, That's exactly what we're talking about. Morality is relative to the context and complexity of the situation. Morality is relative to the context and the complexity of the situation. Right or wrong here or now must be applied differently from right or wrong there or then. And our role as spiritual leaders is to help our people learn to do that wisely. And that requires a whole lot more of us than simply laying down the rules. It requires that we teach our folks a more robust process. We have to teach them the art of discernment. We have to teach them a cyclical process of discernment. First, we make a decision. Then we observe the consequences of that decision. Then we reflect on the impact and the consequences of the decision, and then we adjust so that that can affect the outcomes of next decisions. And through that process, we create a world that is more true and good and beautiful. Learning to look for, discern, and then prioritize the values and the principles behind the rules, that is how we build a more perfect world. And that is a mission that cannot be achieved by merely following the right answers. It is a process of constant discernment, a process essential in this complex, paradoxical world in which we live. And our job as spiritual leaders is to help our people develop the internal infrastructure and the internal skills to be able to do that. And as we've been saying, if our communities would offer anything useful to this moment in history, this is us doing that. Helping our people develop the capacity to live with paradox, to act under uncertainty, to discern wisely in a complex world. That's what polycrisis and metacrisis needs. A gazillion spiritual communities bringing people to the world who can do that. All right, next episode, more about how. How do we do that? If you want to get notified when that goes live, you go ahead, subscribe.